Unfortunately, in life, sometimes we lose somebody we care about. Maybe they left us. Maybe we left them. Maybe it's just that both your lives don't align. Either way, it sucks. Because you had this connection with somebody, and the connection was so powerful that it meant something to you. I'm Dr. Tank. I worked for 4 years in neuroimaging research in memory of dementia and Alzheimer's patients. The goal there was to help patients with their brain and memory so they could have better quality of life. And a lot of the research there was fundamental in the current treatment programs that we have now. And I want to share some of the things that I figured out so that you don't have to struggle with your emotions and memory. You may end up thinking about this person constantly, and it may interfere or disrupt your regular life and work life, causing you problems at work, at home, with your friends and family, or causing severe consequences. Changing these thought patterns are difficult, but not impossible. A lot of advice out there is either useless or meaningless. Here are some examples. Be realistic. Are we living in a virtual reality? Focus on acceptance. I accepted it, now what? Love yourself. What? That doesn't bring them back. I still think about them. Now, some of the advice is actually helpful, but only partially covers the problem. This includes get support from friends and family, or have no contact with this person, or journal your experiences. And we're going to talk about why they're only partially effective later. First, let's talk about how our mind works. The route that you take to thinking about that person is the logical aspect. It's the memories that you have. But the highway and how many lanes it has is the emotional impact of that thought. So the more lanes that your mind has, the stronger the emotional connection. So when that person no longer is there, because when you arrive to this destination, there's nobody there. And what happens when you're lost? You start panicking. You think about all the consequences that could happen. You could get kidnapped. They could harvest your organs. They could kill you and bury you in the desert. Your mind spirals out of control. So what's the advice most people give? They tell you to go to your hobbies, or they tell you to find a new hobby. So you find a new hobby. You take up brewing, but you don't care about this one as much. So the route that you take is a very narrow dirt road. It doesn't have the same emotional impact. So the lane isn't as wide and it's not as productive. And we could talk about attachment styles and why you're attracted to this type of person and how to deal with that. But that's more on the lines of therapy. What I want to do is to help you understand what's going on and how to actively take back control. Now, there's a rule in motorcycling that you can't look at something unless you want to go there. Because what happens is, when you end up looking at a car, for example, you're going to collide into it. And if you look at the person that you don't want to think about, you're going to think about it. It's sort of like how our minds can't think in the negative. If I tell you not to think of a pink elephant, chances are you're probably going to think of a pink elephant. That's why you shouldn't suppress this memory, because it's going to be very difficult to do so. You're going to end up thinking about it instead of avoiding your thoughts about it. So what actually works? So here's what usually happens, is that we have a strong emotional connection with this person, and there are multiple lanes going to this person, and they're not around anymore. So this highway of thought gets processed, and it becomes better and more efficient because you're constantly using it. So what does the brain do? It builds more lanes. The more you think about it, the more lanes are going to be built, and the stronger the emotions will be. Over time, you might stop using these highways. And what happens is, it starts breaking down because you're not using it as much. Eventually, more lanes get broken down. And it makes sense because our body allocates resources to what's more efficient. And if we're not using the roads, it's going to break it down. What we hope happens is that over time, the memories will fade and will get better. The problem with that is that there's no way of telling how long that memory is going to take before it fades away. In addition, there are other problems we haven't encountered. For example, usually there's a huge problem that we've ignored for a very long time. So there's a huge sinkhole in this highway. We've never actually solved this problem. That's why this route didn't work out. But here's the thing. When we're on a road and we're driving really quickly, we pass over these potholes, and it doesn't seem like there's a problem. We've bypassed problem because it's more comfortable to ignore it. An effective way of us not thinking about the person is to provide no contact. So you've basically stopped yourself from actively trying to think of this person. But that doesn't mean that it never comes back. It's only one step that might help you. One piece of advice that actually helps is to feel your emotion. What that means is you want to slow down every single time you take this road. What happens when you slow down on a road with bad pavement? You actually feel every bump, and you realize how painful that drive actually is. When you're speeding through potholes, you don't feel the impact of every bump. If you slow down and feel the sensations of every bump, you're gonna realize how painful it actually is. And pain is one of the greatest motivators. If you actually feel the pain in that pothole, in this poorly driven road, you're gonna actively want to avoid it because it hurts driving this lane. Here's the problem though. Where do you go? This is where it's helpful to find a new hobby, but not just any hobby, because a lot of people take up consumption hobbies, collecting for example. And although it can bring you short-term happiness, in the long run, it doesn't provide long-term happiness. One of the best ways to provide long-term happiness is to provide yourself with a long-term need, one of which includes providing yourself with skills. That's why a lot of people go to the gym. Going to the gym is a great goal. What happens is you use the energy of your emotion and start going to the gym. It's a rough terrain. You don't know where that road's even headed, but eventually, maybe you start going in the right direction. And the best thing about having skills with measurable goals is that you start seeing progress. And progress is important to having a skill. This is why it's more important to have a skill than it is to have a consumption hobby. Consumption hobbies have targets that constantly move. If you buy something or collect something, you're gonna want more. So that target keeps getting pushed out. You'll only be happy for a fraction of a second when you own something, and you're gonna wanna move on to the next. And it's gonna keep costing you money and time and space. On the other hand, when you have a skill that's measurable, you start seeing progress. The body rewards you with dopamine and serotonin. And because of those increase in hormones, it strengthens the route to the new sensations and thoughts. And over time, this starts building a highway to this new progress. The old highway starts breaking down because you're not using it as much, and the resources are allocating to the new highway. But here's the problem with going to the gym as therapy. A lot of people will use the gym as therapy, and that's great. The problem is people don't start solving the pothole problem. So when someone else new comes along, you're gonna take that same highway and you're gonna run into the same pot. You can't work out 24 hours a day. There will be times that you need to rest. And in that rest time, your mind will default to thinking about this person, and it's gonna make you feel sad. You wanna make sure that during your off time, you start targeting your weaknesses. Fix the problems in your life. And that's what people mean by work on yourself. They want you to fix the potholes in your life so that you don't run over them again. You don't want to feel the pain you had before. A lot of people will try and find somebody new to replace the old person. There's a saying that in order to get over someone, you have to get under someone new. Again, the problem is the pothole is still there. There are still problems with you that you haven't fixed because you've ignored them. And I'm not saying this to be mean. I've had many of those problems, but I try to work on them so that next time in my next relationship, they won't be a problem again. So to stop constantly thinking about somebody, you want to make sure that you provide yourself with new skills or goals that are measurable and that provide you with happiness so that you reinforce the new routes. And in the meantime, you work on the old problems so that you don't encounter them again. Hopefully it provides you some clarity on how emotions and memories work so that you can stop thinking about somebody and stop having it disrupt your life. I know it's hard, but it's not impossible. You can do this. I believe in you. And until next time, guys, never give up on yourself.